We're coming to you live from Pallet Town.
This is Nerdcast.
I'm Mitch.
I'm Jess.
And we're here to bring you everything nerd culture is meant to be.
Nerd news, nerd reviews, and of course all the gear that you could ever possibly want.
This
is
Nerdcast.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. Roger. Ready to move out.
Tonight on Nerdcast, a lot about Iron Man.
Video game piracy.
My weekly reviews for comics, movies, and games.
Nerd gear that you just have to have.
And clever, witty banter between two co-hosts.
Well, mine's clever.
That's just low.
Welcome to Nerdcast.
Viewers, I want you to get to know me. So, here are some reviews for some things I like. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate released in March to critical acclaim. And good news for fans, it totally stands up to the hype. First off, if you've never played Monster Hunter before, the game is an action RPG that's essentially boss battles only. The player takes the role of a hunter in a primitive tribe that survives by slaying giant monsters, then taking the hacked off pieces and making weapons and armor, which are in turn used to slay larger monsters. It's basically the MMO gratification cycle, but streamlined to the finest points. Storyline boils down to saving the village from whichever dragon happens to be on the box art this time around, and then you kill it and wear it. If you're thinking Lady Gaga Caveman Edition, I can't say you're entirely wrong. If it sounds like I just described the whole series instead of a single game, that's because I did. The new version of Monster Hunter is really just an expansion than a full game. The base elements like combat and crafting remain basically the same in each title, so if you've played the one, then you know what to expect from the second and the third, but with a different roster of creatures to exterminate. A good way to think about it is the Madden of fantasy games. So to be more specific, MH3U is basically a port of a critically acclaimed Monster Hunter Tri for the Nintendo Wii. Tri was the first time Monster Hunter was available on a Nintendo console, and it sold pretty well in the United States, and stupidly well in Japan, even getting the coveted perfect score in Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu. So this game is a remake of what is widely considered to be a good game. So theoretically, it's a perfect game. Now it can be played in HD if you've got the Wii U, or in 3D if you've got the 3DS, or both if you have both. Then there are elements from Tri that 3U improves upon, which is basically anything that has to do with the underwater missions. Tri restricted the types of weapons that could be used underwater, so 3U said that's pretty stupid and made everything work, despite what physics would demand of a gun made out of dinosaur bones. Also, 3U finally adds a lock-on button. You'd think that if you were trying to kill a giant electrified iguana with a Buster Sword, you'd be pretty focused, but Monster Hunter is so ridden with bad camera controls that you can actually lose track of the giant carnivorous thing 3 times your size. The lock-on button fixes some of the main camera problems, but not all of them, admittedly. Just the main ones. So that's fixed-ish, but the original problems of Monster Hunter still persist. Most of these problems come from when the game tries too hard to be an MMO. For example, if the game requires a bit of a time commitment. Dedicated players say that the game can take 9 or 10 hours before it really gets going. And even after that point, it can take a dozen repeated missions before a monster will drop the super rare item you need. I swear the game has a desire sensor that keeps the last item you need from dropping. It's infuriating, but since I'm not sure the desire sensor actually exists, I can't really call it a point against the game. Also, there are those typical kill X of the little useless monster quests that pop up every now and again. Frankly, these quests suck. And the resource they offer as a reward are not anything particularly hard to get, they just keep you from the fun stream of infinite boss fights, which is much where you'd rather be, I assure you. If you've already bought Monster Hunter Tri, played through it, and you're done with it, you can safely give 3U a pass. But if you're a new player and you have friends with a Wii U and they say, we want to play with you, do it. MH3U is the most noob-friendly of the series, and the beginning is streamlined so that legendary 10-hour startup time is severely reduced. And the early monsters have much less health than before. So go for it, new hunters. Go forth and murder things and wear their skins. And now, a little more recently, Iron Man 3 released on May 3rd. It's the end of a trilogy. It's the end of an era. But oh man, is it so good. Now, before a proper review, let me just calm down any worried fanboys. Yes, the Avengers is part of the continuity. In fact, the events of the Avengers are so critical to the plot of the movie that it just assumes you've seen the Avengers. And odds are it's probably true. So good guess, movie. Well played. At the beginning, as the opening volley of the summer blockbuster rush, Iron Man 3 does what summer audiences want. It's got your explosions, it's got your massive fight sequences, and perhaps most important to the genre, it's easy. The movie acknowledges that it's a comic book movie and a kid's movie, and you can just relax while the movie pelts your face with explosions and shrapnel. That's not to say it lacks depth, though. The movie gives us a shaken Tony Stark. His time fighting with the Avengers has given him severe PTSD, and he spends his time hiding in his house and building more Iron Man suits. Then terrorists attack, and Tony Stark has to rebuild. Metaphorically. It's a character-driven, comic book-style plot that shows even heroes can be frightened sometimes, and all without sacrificing the action or slowing down the pace. Robert Downey Jr. once again conquers the role of Tony Stark, and his raw talent shines through to keep the slower, non-action portions of the movie up to pace. Gwyneth Paltrow owns every scene she's in, and without saying too much, it's good to see that her character gets an arc as well. So does Iron Man 3 draw the series to a satisfying conclusion? Yeah. In fact, it's almost too conclusive. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but as a fan, I'm curious to see how Marvel plans to incorporate this into the Avengers 2 when that drops in 2015. Maybe a more important question, how does this trilogy conclusion compare to Batman's? Well, will the ending enrage Marvel fans, just like Dark Knight Rises enraged Batman fans? And honestly, maybe, but I don't think the rage will be based on fans not wanting to see the series end, instead of gaping plot holes, a silly ending, or a sidekick whose real name is also his superhero name. Basically, I'm trying to say Iron Man 3 is better than Batman 3, and that's a big, heartbreaking admission for me, and I'd be really upset about it, but I just watched Iron Man 3, so I'm feeling pretty happy. Final word, take the kids, watch it in 3D if that doesn't give you a headache, and just enjoy a superhero movie the way it's supposed to be done. Continuing on my Marvel kick, last weekend was Free Comic Book Day. If you went, I hope you picked up Marvel's Infinity. Jonathan Hickman's been building towards an event in the Avengers and New Avengers, and the free issue is to tell you the surprise event is Thanos. It's not really even a spoiler, his face is on the cover. But if you've been paying attention to certain blockbuster films, you know that our gauntlet-wielding friend was due sooner or later. You'd think that putting the reveal on the cover might take the suspense from the issue, but it doesn't. Hickman compresses everything to a nice little arc that's more about introducing Thanos and demonstrating how his new army operates. And, by the way, they operate by way of complete dominance. The Outrider, or the minion the issue revolves around, conquers a planet by himself, and there's no reason to believe that he's the only one. That means Thanos could have an army, and each one could be on par with any single hero in the Marvel Universe. And that means Marvel might be giving Thanos one of the most powerful armies in recent memory. Long story short, Marvel wants you to think that wants you to think about Thanos, because Avengers 2 is coming. And they have no problem putting actual creative talent behind keeping that idea alive. Special thanks to Jeremy Lawton for this week's comic book review.
Brothers and game developers at Greenheart Games have come up with an interesting way to deal with video game piracy. They uploaded their new PC title, Game Dev Tycoon, onto various torrent websites with one minor change. Once players are well into the newer console generations, their hit games are pirated and they can't make any money. Players who pirated the game have then posted on their forums asking for help, not realizing that they just admitted that they didn't pay for the game. They hope to show people exactly what they do to the gaming industry by pirating. Unfortunately, this $8 game was pirated by more than 90% of its players. Plants vs. Zombies 2 has been announced. The game is appropriately titled, It's About Time, and while no other details have been released yet, we do have a projected date of July 2013. The EA-owned game developer PopCap hasn't said what platforms the game will launch on, but it's likely to be on PC and systems. The main thing is that it's coming. Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Remake will be out this September in North America and Europe. If you pre-order the game, a grand total of $40, you will get a fancy art book for the series. That's okay, Square Enix. I'll wait for Kingdom Hearts 3. PS4. At least the remake has trophies. EA has reported that their sales for SimCity have reached 1.6 million. They also announced Sims 4, which will be released in 2014 and will be playable offline, unlike their latest attempt at a simulation game. Hopefully they've learned their lesson for good. NBC's Grimm has crossed over into the land of comics. The series follows homicide detective Nick Burkhart of the Portland Police Bureau, who learns he is a descendant from the line of guardians known as Grimms. He is charged with keeping balance between humanity and mythological creatures. Beginning this issue, Kelly, Nick's mom, begins her quest to destroy the coins of Zakynthos. Dynamite Entertainment is the publisher. The art is Joe Malaga, and the story is by David Greenwalt, Jim Koff, and Mark Gaffin, and Kyle McVeigh. It was released back in May 8th. Telltale Games had announced way back in March that its Fables game, The Wolf Among Us, would launch this summer, and now the company has revealed new details about the game based on Bill Willingham's long-running Vertigo comic series. They featured this in Game Informer. The game takes place prior to the first arc of Fables. Players take on the role of Sheriff Bigby Wolf in his investigation of a murder. In addition to the central conflict, The Wolf Among Us also centers on Bigby's development of feelings for Snow White. And while, of course, it wouldn't be a Telltale video game without the possibility of making imperative decisions and building relationships with other characters, this makes the players have to balance Bigby's role as sheriff against the personal relationships with others. The Wolf Among Us has specific story points, thus giving players the choice of when to go to certain locations in the story. This will allow them to experience the story differently for each playthrough. Although Nintendo will not be making its usual conference at E3 this year, they will still have games to play in addition to 2 press events Tuesday morning at the show. They recently held a Nintendo Direct that announced several games for their consoles, so it is unknown how many new games will be revealed, if any. Microsoft will show off the next Xbox 720 on May 21st. There have been many rumors and much speculation, some of which even reportedly been debunked. In a few weeks, we will know more details about their new system. At 10 a.m. Pacific, you can tune in on Xbox Live, Xbox.com, or Spike TV to watch it. Microsoft also registered several domains related to the name Xbox Fusion. For more current game, comic, and movie news or reviews, like us on Facebook at Nerdcast. This is Nerd Gear, where we talk about all the latest gear that you can use.
First up on the gear list, Sony has announced new VioFit notebooks designed from their thin and powerful models, but at a cheaper price point. The new Fit line was created with Windows 8 in mind, and prices will be starting around $550. This is the start of the back-to-school gear that various companies will be rolling out over the summer.
Google I/O is scheduled for May 15th through 17th. A new software is expected to be rolled out, either Jelly Bean 4.3 or Key Lime Pie 5.0, and possibly more updates on Google Glass are expected. West Virginia has already tried to pass legislation banning the use of Google Glasses while driving, which just might make them one of the smarter states when it comes to tech. Then again, it is.
No! Take that, evil space invader of wheat. You shall never take me alive. Aha! Looks like you don't have a leg to stand on. Haha, but I have one. This one. Does a little song and dance. No! I do the word.
Welcome back, and this is Table Talk. Here we're just going to talk about any conversation that happens to come up, anything that's up in nerd culture right now. But for today's first episode, we're just going to talk about Pokemon. So, I'm first. What did you like about Pokemon?
They were adorable, I think. When I first got into Pokemon, I was about 10, and of course I was watching the anime before I even knew it was called anime. My brother was older, and he just didn't understand my fascination with Pokemon. Then finally, when they got me the Game Boy games, I started with Red and Blue, and then later we got Yellow. He then started to play them too, and was like, oh, I actually kind of like this. So for Christmas one year, he got me Gold and Silver. Not so I could play them, but so he could play them. And he had Pokemon Stadium, so he got the adapter for the game, that you put into the controller, and he's playing on the TV. And then he wouldn't let me do that.
So he could just hijack the games from you whenever he wanted.
Yes. And then he would overwrite my save file. How mean was that? I was like this close to the board.
It happens every time.
Every time.
Every time. Every time. I would give my brother my Game Boy with red version, and he'd overwrite it, and I'd lose everything I did that day. And that's how I learned what real regret was.
Nintendo, more than one save file.
For people with siblings. People with siblings and talking to people and being general friends. Now, we got the new games coming out. We got X and Y. They just released the Legendaries. Nintendo just said, these are what we're looking at. One of them is a big Y-shaped bird. One of them is a deer.
Yes, Xerneas and Eviltal, or I can't.
I think it's Eviltal.
Eviltal. Something. They released the pronunciations, but they're still a little. They're still a little. You have to actually hear it, I think, when the anime comes out. But I personally like the red one better.
Mm-hmm.
I like that bright color, and but it didn't really release the types. So the bird is probably going to be flying type. Obviously, it's a bird.
That's the easy one.
But I'm more curious to see what Xerneas will be.
Yeah, the deer, because it's just, for those of you not with an image of it right now, the deer is it's a bluish sort of looking deer with multicolored rainbow horn antlers coming off the top of its head, looking like something out of Princess Mononoke. What I'm thinking is that it might be the first time a legendary has been normal type.
You know, I don't quite agree with that. It reminds me of the fighting legendaries. It kind of reminds me of one of those. So I think it's going to be fighting and then another type. I also think the Y-shaped bird is going to be has a second type somewhere in there. But they also released the new Evolution, which I have to say right now I'm not a big fan of it. I think it might be a normal type Pokemon unless they come out with a brand new type, which I don't even know what it would be. But I was kind of hoping that we could see something new. There are lots of fan art out there with names and designs and the type along with it and everything. And they're really fantastic. Nintendo needs to please hire these people. Just hire these people.
Well, you just asked Nintendo, the company that makes the same Mario title every couple of years, to do something completely new and original.
Yeah, you're right. My bad.
So, that brings us to the next thing. Can we please talk about how ridiculous Team Plasma's plan is in Pokemon Black and White and Black and White 2?
Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know, spoilers, just heads up, in Black and White there is this kind of PETA thing going on. There was this character named N who was basically raised with Pokemon. He could understand the different Pokemon's thoughts and feelings. But he didn't realize that the person who had been raising him was trying to take over the world. So he was using N, who really felt Pokemon should be free, to convince other people to get rid of their Pokemon. So he would be the only one with Pokemon and could take over the world.
And this is a terrible plan, because Pokemon is the whole world in Pokemon. The entire society, all of its economy, everything's based on Pokemon. There are no hospitals for people. There are no items that are food or hotels. All the convenience stores are full of things for Pokemon. If you don't have Pokemon, the world collapses. The humans only exist to raise Pokemon. They don't eat or sleep at any point in the game. You constantly walk between towns through day and night without rest. There is only Pokemon. This child has no sense of the greater world he's in. He's going to ruin a lot of people's livelihood.
Yeah, and you know, the funny part is even in the games, they don't really focus on you. They'll be like, oh, in Blacktooth, they're like, oh, you remind me of that person that stopped us 2 years ago. But here's the thing. You can make movies, but you don't star in them. Your Pokemon does. You know, in Ruby and Sapphire, they added in the breeding where you could feed them Pokeblocks and make them pretty and go to shows and, you know, compete. So they've done a lot of stuff to showcase off Pokemon. But then, like, the most you can do is choose whether you're a boy or a girl.
So I think it's pretty obvious that the world of Pokemon instead of what we think it is, actually represents a dystopian society where human beings are conquered by animals who exist only to barbarically fight each other.
Well, that's kind of like cats. They consider you the slave. You've seen that picture, right?
Yes.
The dog thinks that, you know, humans must be God because they take care of him, and cats are like, oh, I must be God because they worship me. Pretty much how that is. But yeah, so there's a lot of differences between the old games and the new games. So the new games the new games start off relatively the same. You're in your hometown, you get to choose between grass, fire, water.
Grass.
Fire.
Grass.
Most of the time it's fire for me. And actually, I'm kind of torn with the Pokemon X and Y, whether I want the grass or the fire type. They're both so adorable. The frog, however, he can just stay over there.
No, it's not about adorable. It's about utility. Grass type has the most utility going into the late game. Yeah, the fire Pokemon's powerful. Everyone remembers Charizard because he had the best Pokemon card, except for Mewtwo, who's amazing. But when you go right down to it, if you're thinking strategy, because it is a strategy game,
That it
it's
is.
an RPG, you go grass type, you get your grass type moves, and then you get your solar beam, and you get your poison attacks, you get the poison powder and the sleep powder, and you get a whole mix of attacks that are more than just the straight up like doing damage. And I know in Pokemon a lot of the strategy is just doing the damage that matches the weakest element. But if you're a more advanced, older player, you might try for a more obnoxious strategy. You know, death by inches. You've got plenty of people who build like a Tentacruel in the original one where you could build bind with poison sting and just whittle someone down over time. And that gives you much more utility. It makes the game a little bit deeper.
Right. Well, they also have EV training now. So you can specifically make a Pokemon not only towards one element, but towards one stat. So you can really boost their attack stat and their speed, and then just make them sweepers. They can just knock out Pokemon because they move first, and then they attack hard, and the health just goes down.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, after a while, it just gets to a point where they're, you know, it's just about just attacking something. It's essentially just a giant game of rock, paper, scissors. By going with a grass type at the beginning, you're looking for more utility, more strategy. Grass type for the older players.
Right. Well, that's up for debate. I normally get rid of my starters, so that's why I pick whichever ones I think are more adorable. But I'll probably wait until I see what the final looks like. Anyways, that's it for Table Talk for this episode.
All right, I'm Mitch Monin,
I'm Jess Fordyce.
and this has been Nerdcast.
We'll see you next week.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook.
You can email us too.
We don't know which camera's on.